Have you ever felt the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, even when you're alone in a room? There's a chill in the air, a sense of unease that you can't quite put your finger on. This, dear listeners, is the essence of horror, a genre that has captivated audiences for generations. Horror, in its essence, is a play on our primal fears and instinctual responses. It's the shadow in the corner of your eye, the creaking floorboard in an empty house, the flickering light in a room where the light shouldn't flicker. It's the unknown, the unseen, the unexplainable. Our minds are wired for survival, and when we're faced with these subtle cues of danger, our bodies respond instinctively. Our hearts race, our palms sweat, and adrenaline surges through our veins. But what makes horror truly terrifying? It's not the monster under the bed or the ghost in the attic, it's suspense, the anticipation of the unknown, the fear of what's to come. It's the quiet moments before the storm, the ticking clock before the strike of midnight. Filmmakers use suspense to keep us on the edge of our seats, our eyes glued to the screen as we wait, breathless, for the inevitable. And yet, despite the fear, we can't look away. The psychological effects of horror movies are profound. They trigger our fight or flight response, releasing a rush of adrenaline that leaves us feeling alert and alive. Our heartbeats quicken, our breaths become shallow, and our muscles tense. It's a roller coaster of emotions, a thrill ride that leaves us craving for more. So you see, horror is more than just blood and gore. It's a psychological dance, a game of cat and mouse that taps into our deepest, darkest fears. It's the unseen terror that lurks in the corners of our minds, the primal fear that keeps us awake at night. So let's dive deep into the unseen terror, shall we? So what makes a horror movie truly terrifying? It's not just about the eerie surroundings, the lurking shadows, or the blood-curdling screams. It's much more nuanced than that. At its core, horror is about suspense, surprise, and the unknown. Suspense is the slow, creeping sensation that something dreadful is about to happen. It's the ticking clock that keeps us on the edge of our seats, our hearts pounding as we wait for the inevitable. It's the anticipation of fear rather than fear itself that truly grips us. It's the quiet before the storm, the calm before the chaos. Then comes the surprise, the sudden jolt that makes us jump out of our skin. It's the unexpected twist that takes us by shock, the startling revelation that leaves us gasping for breath. It's the abruptness of fear, the sharp contrast between calm and chaos that truly shakes us. But perhaps the most potent element of horror is the unknown. The fear of the unknown is deeply rooted in our psyche. It's the lurking danger that we cannot see, the unseen terror that we cannot comprehend. It's the mystery of the dark, the uncertainty of the future that truly haunts us. Horror movies manipulate our senses and emotions to elicit this fear. They use sound, light, and imagery to create an atmosphere of dread. They play on our primal fears and deepest insecurities. They exploit our imagination, making us see things that aren't there, hear things that aren't real. But it's not just our senses that are manipulated, it's our emotions as well. Horror movies make us feel vulnerable, helpless, and alone. They make us question our sanity, doubt our reality. They make us confront our own mortality, face our own demons. The fear we feel is not just psychological but physiological too. Our hearts race, our palms sweat, our muscles tense, our bodies react as if we are facing a real threat, preparing us for fight or flight. The fear we feel is not just in our minds but in our bodies as well. In every horror movie, there are certain elements that are always present. These elements, or tropes as they're often referred to, are the bread and butter of the horror genre. They're the familiar faces in the crowd of the unknown, the constants in a sea of variables, and they're what give horror its unique flavor. One such trope is the final girl. This character is typically a young, innocent woman who, against all odds, is the last one standing. She's the one who finally vanquishes the monster, who survives the night, who lives to tell the tale. Over time, the final girl has evolved from a damsel in distress to a formidable force in her own right. She's no longer just a survivor, but a fighter, a symbol of resilience and strength. Then we have the creepy child. This trope takes something as innocent as a child and turns it into something deeply unsettling. The juxtaposition of youth and evil, innocence and malevolence is a potent mix that's been chilling audiences to the bone for years. This trope has seen a fascinating evolution too, with the creepy child often becoming a conduit for some greater, more sinister force. Next up is the haunted house. This is a classic, a staple of the genre. The haunted house is a character in its own right, a living, breathing entity filled with dark secrets and hidden horrors. It's the setting that sets the stage, the backdrop against which our nightmares play out. Over the years, the haunted house has morphed from a physical location to a metaphorical one, representing the inner demons and past traumas of the characters. These tropes are more than just recurring themes. They're a language, a code that speaks to our deepest fears and darkest nightmares. They're the tools that filmmakers use to craft their terrifying tales. And they're constantly evolving, changing and growing, just like the genre itself. These tropes are the building blocks of terror, and they've been terrifying audiences for decades. Now that we know what makes a horror movie scary, how do filmmakers actually go about scaring us? Well, it's a symphony of techniques, each playing their part to create a crescendo of fear. Let's start with sound. Sound is a powerful tool in a filmmaker's arsenal. A sudden sharp noise can make us jump out of our seats, while a low, rumbling sound can build a sense of dread. The absence of sound or silence is just as potent. It can lure us into a false sense of security, only to shatter it with a terrifying revelation. Next, we have lighting. Shadows and darkness are often used to obscure the source of our fear, leaving our imagination to fill in the blanks. It's the unknown that truly terrifies us, yet a sudden flash of light can expose a horrifying sight that was lurking in the shadows, catching us off guard. Camera angles are another crucial element. An unusual or disorientating angle can make us feel uneasy or off balance. It can also force us to see things from a perspective we'd rather not, such as the viewpoint of a villain or a victim. And then there's the score. The music in a horror film is like an unseen character, guiding our emotions and reactions. A tense, suspenseful score can make our hearts race, while a soft, eerie melody can send chills down our spines. Each of these elements is a brushstroke in the larger painting of fear. Alone, they might not seem like much, but when they're combined, they form a terrifying masterpiece that can make even the bravest among us squirm. It's important to remember that these techniques aren't used to simply shock or startle us. They're used to create a deep, lingering sense of unease that stays with us long after the credits roll. The art of scaring is a carefully crafted one, and it's these techniques that keep us on the edge of our seats. So why do we keep coming back to horror movies despite the terror they instill in us? The allure of horror movies is a fascinating enigma, a paradox of sorts. We, as humans, are naturally inclined to avoid fear. Yet there's something irresistibly enticing about the adrenaline rush that comes from watching a chilling scene unfold on the screen. The heart pounding, the palms sweating, the thrill of the unknown. It's a high, like no other. Imagine being on a roller coaster. The climb is filled with anticipation. Your heart beats faster with every tick of the ascent. Then the drop comes and your stomach lurches. You scream, not out of fear but exhilaration. Horror movies provide a similar kind of thrill, a controlled scare that we know is temporary and harmless. But the power of horror extends beyond just the thrill. There's a certain catharsis that comes from surviving a horror movie. You've been through the dark forest, you've faced the monstrous entity, and you've come out the other side safe and sound. It's a journey of survival, even if it's vicarious. This sense of relief and accomplishment of surviving the unsurvivable is another force that draws us back to the genre. Moreover, horror movies provide a safe space to explore our deepest fears and anxieties. They allow us to confront what scares us in a controlled environment. Fear of the dark, fear of the unknown, fear of death. These primal fears are often central themes in horror. By watching these movies, we can face these fears head-on, understand them, and perhaps learn to manage them better in our daily lives. Horror, in its most potent form, serves as a mirror to society, reflecting our collective fears and anxieties. It can be a tool for social commentary, highlighting issues that plague our society, from racism to consumerism. Horror movies have the power to scare us, thrill us, and even help us cope with our fears. It's this power that keeps us coming back for more.